how do you propose that we, in retrospect, I mean, how would you even propose that we compete? Okay, so now we have to compete with the mainland, okay, because we're not on that same level, it seems as though. So how do we now compete not only with the mainland, now we have to compete with international students that are learning 2 to 3 languages a day and devoting their lives to further educating themselves. How do we compete with that? What is the answer? What can we do to provide a better education here?
First, I think we have to take stock of what's actually going on in the rest of the world. The number of PhD that China and India is producing is far above and beyond what we are producing in terms of PhDs in science and math and just general higher education. There's that comparison, not for sake of jealousy, but for the point of where, if that's where the rest of the world's going and this is where we are staying rather stagnant, some of the things that we've got to do is to encourage, some have talked about letting education and tuition rise to the top to where you wouldn't have to pay all the expenses, $50,000 a year to go to Stanford or other places. We've got to allow people to rise up much quicker. There's no magic bullet, but it's a matter of what I think when I was at the university, they said child-rearing habits are very important. When the kids come home at night, if they don't do their homework, they can't go out to play. And stressing the value of education, which, because of the Asian component here, is very strong, very alive, very well. We've got to give the incentives for them to do that and expose them to what's going on in the world. So the first is the realization of what's happening, and then, what's the word? Best practices? Who's making the better mousetrap? And then following that. What's the better mousetrap for education, Kymberly?
Well, I think the teachers that I met with a couple weeks ago said it best. They said, Kim, if we got rid of the whole Department of Education and just had the teachers and the principals, do you think we're going to notice that in our classrooms? And of course, no offense to all my friends in the Department of Education, but it did have an effect on my thinking. Because, in the old days when Hawaii had the highest literacy rate in the nation, when we became a state, that's all it was. It was just teachers and students. And they were learning faster and better and stronger. And I think, again, that philosophy that government should take care of everything. So the government and the Department of Education should be huge and they should handle everything, when really it just needs to be smaller and let the principals lead and the teachers teach instead of getting all into their business. They know what's best for education.
And then we can't find places to cut the budget because we fund all of these different programs. We fund the stadium here. We fund the Artmobile, as Jamie was talking about earlier. We fund all these things. So then when it comes down to actually cutting the budget, well, where do we cut the budget? Everything's as important as everything else. So it comes down to that essential question of where can we cut these budgets? Where can we? But in essence, this is my money, and I believe, as many others believe, that maybe we can spend our money differently. Maybe we can spend our money better. The 30% or the 48% or whatever the percentage bracket that you might fall into that takes that money out of your paycheck, maybe you could spend it better. And I think that's the premise of this conversation, is that perhaps there's a better way for taxpayers to be spending their money if they had it in themselves. And so what is the next step to getting something like this through? What is the next step to taking back a little bit of our money back from government, putting it into our pockets? What do we have to do? And we focused on it a little bit earlier, but really,
it's really the people have to revolt. And I think
the Boston Tea Party?
It's a scary word.
No, here's what's happening. You got the federal government, they're increasing taxes on businesses and certain people. And you got Movie Hanneman, who's doing the worst tax of them all, the property tax increase, which hurts every elderly person in my district that have saved all their lives so that they can just retire. I had several of them say last year, it's like, I'm going to have to sell my dream house. And their dream house is this cute little tiny 2-bedroom house, 1 story, 50 years old house. They're going to have to sell it because the tax increase doesn't fit in their budget because they're retired. They're 80. They can't go back to work. They can't get a job. And then you add these state taxes. I don't know which one's going to go through, which we're fighting them all. But you add all of that, And this time next year, everyone is going to start really feeling it. Or actually in the next 6 months, it depends when these laws are enacted, they're going to start feeling it. And they're not going to see just a little chunk off their paychecks. They're going to see a huge chunk.
So we have to stand
Many
up
people are going to get
bad
laid
government.
off because businesses are going to hurt. And so it really truly is they just have to revolt. Otherwise, you might as well just stand in one place and let a boxer just keep hitting you in the face, because that's what's happening.
But the reality is the voter turnout and the interest in the participation in the political process is actually going down instead of going up. So there's, I don't know if it's a paradigm shift or a burnout on the part of some of the people to not get engaged because too much same old, same old.
Yeah. Well, I think when something truly hits you in your pocket, people change. I think right now they're hurting, but they're not really hurting that bad yet.
There was an incident here about 2 weeks ago when House Bill 444 catalyzed 12,000 people to come down to the Capitol. Now that's like because it threatens same-sex marriage issues. But when it comes to really where the pocketbook gets hurt, because if Moofy raises taxes on everybody's property tax, which is coming, if other bus fares go up for the people who've got to ride the bus, they don't have their own car, it's going to be, and this is where those in our profession are wise. They know that if you put the frog in the water and slowly turn up the heat, you could cook the bugger and he doesn't even realize it. But if you got it boiling, you throw him in, he's going to jump up. And I think the taxing issue is a slow burn and a slow cooking. And people, but let me put it this way: when I really grieve for the lady who was sitting out in front of one of your stores in Evan, and suddenly somebody comes up and knifes her. I mean, the total crazed mindset. But when times are tough, people escape. They drink, they do drugs, and the first thing that families fight over is what?
Money.
Money. So the more we put on the back of the people of Hawaii, the more we're basically breaking the families up. The more we're pushing them to go do booze and drugs and escape. And with some of these things that cause them to go berserk, we're endangering the public by the way we're increasing the taxes. And I know there's not a direct scientific regression line and a link to doing that, but in commonsensical terms, you keep putting more straw on the camel's back. You keep putting more burdens on the people of Hawaii. And we're already the highest taxed in the nation. It's only that when they break, I think they fight with themselves, their families, but they haven't come to our doorsteps the way that we like to see them. And that's why we appreciate your program here, bringing and exposing this stuff to the people. And her website, Jamie said, you want to see where the money went? Go to Sunshine, what is it, hawaiisunshine.org? I mean, invaluable resources.
You can also get this pork report.
Yes.
This is what the Grassroots Institute created, and I'm sure they'll come up with another one very soon.
It's free, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Government accountability and transparency. Well, we're actually closing now, so would you guys actually like to give a last statement for the public viewers?
Sure. I just want to remind all of you that, that we work for you. And I think a lot of legislators, once they get too much power, they forget that. But they're not going to remember that they work for you unless you remind them that every once in a while. So I want to thank you so much for joining us. And Gina and I will definitely dedicate our continued terms to definitely work for you and fight for you.
Yes, we will continue to speak out for you, and particularly thank you for bringing us to talk about the economy, the most important issue that I know is on your minds, on our minds. But let me put it this way. We have gone through this before. We can get through this. It's going to happen. Keep your anxiety low and your expectations for your government, your businesses, and others to succeed, and it will.